You are listening to End of Life University podcast, real talk about life and death. This is episode number 185. Welcome to End of Life University podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, hospice physician, author, and educator. In this podcast, I share thoughtful conversations with experts in various fields related to dying and death, and informative teaching sessions on preparing for the end of life by living fully today. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'll be doing a solo episode. This is part 3 of the Mortal Wisdom series, which I began about a month ago. And I'll be talking about what am I doing here, how to find your purpose. So I want you to stay tuned and listen to this episode. I just want to say I know that there have been hundreds of workshops, blog posts, other podcasts, all kinds of lectures and keynote addresses on how to find your purpose. It's a really common topic, but I hope you'll stay tuned and listen to what I have to say, because remember, this is mortal wisdom. This is the wisdom that comes to us from recognizing that we're mortal, that we won't live forever, and the wisdom that I learned from my dying patients. So this will be a little bit different than what you may have heard in the past at other seminars, other podcasts, other lectures where you've listened to people talk about purpose. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. First, I have a couple of announcements. One question that I have that I'd like to put out there to all of you listeners. If any of you knows anyone out there doing work to help people who are having difficulty finding a healthcare proxy, I would love to know about that person and the work they're doing so that I could do an interview with them on the podcast. So if any one of you has heard anyone who has a creative solution for how to provide healthcare proxies, say for older adults who don't have a spouse or children, who don't have close friends or anyone near them that they feel they can trust with that responsibility, how are you helping those people meet that need? So please get in touch with me if you are doing work like that, or if you know someone who is, because I'd love to share that. I feel like that's a big area of need right now that's only going to grow in the future. So email me at karen@karenwyattmd.com. And let me know if you have such a project going on, or please refer someone to me if you know anyone doing that kind of work. And then also I have some new supporters to thank today. On Patreon, Linda Richardson, I'd like to thank, and also Molly Byock and Josie Rabior are giving donations, one-time donations outside of Patreon, which is another option. If you don't want to make a monthly contribution to this show, which is how it works on the Patreon page, you can go to the home page at eoluniversity.com and scroll all the way to the very bottom of the page, and there's a yellow donate button, and you can make a one-time donation using that button if you'd rather not be making a contribution every month. Patreon, though, allows people to sign up for just a small amount of money, a few dollars a month, and become a member of my Patreon team, and then receive special bonuses for their generosity. So once you're on the Patreon platform and part of the EOLU team, you'll receive a monthly Q&A call where I answer your questions. You'll also fairly soon start receiving a monthly end-of-life news update that I'll be putting out. I have a sample of that on the Patreon page that you can listen to if you want to hear what that's like. But I will be reviewing all the news, all the new things going on, and that you might need to know about in that extra little episode. So in addition, right now, if you become a Patreon supporter, you can get access to purchase the EOLU mug, which says End of Life University on one side, but the other side says Mind If I Talk About Death. And so it's kind of a fun mug for you to drink your coffee out of and entertain your coworkers or family members with. And when you become a Patreon supporter, you have a chance to purchase that mug. It isn't free, but you can receive the link to purchase it. So only Patreon supporters will have this mug, at least for now, for quite some time. So if you want to sign up for Patreon, you go to Patreon, patreon.com/EOLU. And on the page, you can learn how to sign up and become a supporter for as little as a couple of dollars a month. So take a look if you're interested. And once again, thank you to everyone who has been supporting the podcast for the last couple of years. You've really made this possible for me. First of all, financially, by helping to offset some of the expenses of creating the podcast, also helping me purchase better equipment like a new microphone and new software for recording. But in addition to that, giving me emotional and spiritual support by letting me know that you're out there listening and you appreciate the work that I'm doing in this podcast. So thanks again to all of my supporters, those on Patreon and those who have made one-time donations. I love you all and I thank you so very much. So we'll move on with my solo episode today. What am I doing here? On how to find your purpose. And I wanted to start by just telling you why this subject became important to me quite a long time ago, early on in my life. So I'm going to start with a little story that came from my own life. This occurred when I was 16 years old. And at that time, I already knew that I wanted to be a doctor. I had made that decision when I was 12. And I was already full steam ahead working toward my goal of being a doctor. I was taking all the science classes I could possibly take as electives in high school, and Latin. I studied Latin for 4 years so that I would be able to understand the Latin that I needed to know as I was learning anatomical terms in medical school. So I already had my sights set on being a doctor, and I thoroughly believed that that was my purpose in life. And I felt very settled with that this is what I came here to do. I came here to be a doctor. That's what I'm going to do with my life. That's my purpose. There was no question in my mind about that. But when I was 16, a friend of mine who was not a best friend, but an acquaintance, and we were on the yearbook staff together. So I saw her every day because we worked together on the yearbook. Jolene was her name. She died in a hiking accident in the mountains near where we lived. She took a step backwards, too close to the edge of the trail, and fell off a cliff to her death. It was very sudden, very shocking, very unexpected for everyone in my high school. We were completely in disbelief, including me, that one of our classmates could die at the age of 16. Something that none of us had ever experienced before, losing someone at such a young age. I remember going to Jolene's funeral, and it was a really beautiful ceremony that was more like, I think, what people today call a celebration of life than it was a sad and sorrowful funeral. The entire church was decorated in yellow with yellow flowers because that was Jolene's favorite color. And there was really upbeat music being played. And I remember the priest who did the sermon at her funeral and who knew Jolene really well because she had been a member of the church's youth group. And it was actually the church group that was on the hike that day when Jolene fell and died. And I remember the priest in his sermon said, Jolene has lived more life in her brief 16 years than most people who live 86 years. And that sentence stuck with me and really stood out for me because he went on to say she fulfilled her purpose in this life. And I was stunned by that and confused at the same time because I didn't understand how someone's life purpose could play out in just 16 years. And I didn't understand how she could have a purpose that included only being alive such a short time. And I was in a complete quandary when I looked at my own life, because here for the very first time, I had realized that it's possible to die at any age. It had occurred to me for the very first time that I could die at any time. I might not live to go to medical school. I might not live to start a medical practice or to take care of patients, this goal and purpose that I had committed myself to for my life. And I was so confused. I didn't understand. How is it possible to fulfill your purpose at such a young age and to leave life being satisfied that you had done what you came here to do? The only thing I understood about purpose was it was something that we would fulfill and accomplish in the future after many years, which indeed was what medical school was and medical training for me. It was going to take me years before I would complete the training, let alone begin to practice and start doing the actual work. So I actually went into a bit of despair because nothing made sense to me anymore. Where I had felt so secure with my decision to become a doctor that I had my whole life mapped out in front of me, suddenly this thought, this awareness that I could die at any time before that happens, really knocked me off base. And I didn't know how to look at life, and I actually began to feel confused and began to feel despair that I don't know if life actually makes any sense. And what if we really don't even have a purpose? What if it's all random? What if we just imagine that we have a purpose, but we could die at any time? We could be snuffed out at any time because we don't matter. And there isn't really even a reason for any of us to be here. That's how I began thinking. So I sank into despair, partly grieving over my friend's death and partly having this existential crisis where I didn't understand what life was about anymore. And that question, what am I doing here? Why am I even here? No longer had an answer and made no sense to me. So for a short time, I sank into this deep feeling of despair and confusion. I really didn't have anyone in my life that I could talk to about the questions that I had. So I just kept to myself, constantly pondering this idea, why am I here? What is this about? What does life mean? And I realized 16 may have been a somewhat young age to be pondering those questions, because later on in my hospice work, I found many people who didn't even consider those questions until they were on their own deathbed at the very end of life. But I had been thrust into a place where it was my time to look at this question of purpose and what I'm doing here. So what happened for me is that one afternoon, I fell asleep in our living room at home in a reclining chair. For some reason, I don't know why that detail stands out to me. I remember so clearly falling asleep in the recliner, and I went into a very, very deep sleep. And I don't remember if I had a dream. I don't remember what happened during the sleep. But I know that when I woke up suddenly and with a start, and there was one word in my mind, one word on my thoughts, and that word was love. And suddenly I jumped up out of the reclining chair, and it was as if these questions I'd been asking about purpose, about why I was here, about what was life about, were all answered, and the word love was the answer. And again, I don't know how that knowledge came to me, and I don't know how it is that I just suddenly embraced it and accepted it, but somehow I knew it was the truth. I knew that I'm here, my purpose here is to learn about love. That's what I'm really doing here. And as I thought it through, it was the perfect answer, because if I'm really here to learn about love, it doesn't really matter if I live long enough to become a doctor, because I could learn about love right now. And if I die young and I don't get to be a doctor, I can still accomplish learning about love because I can start right now and learn that. But if I do get to go on and become a doctor, that'll be an even better place for me to learn more about love. I can learn about love as a doctor by helping people who are sick and taking care of patients. And so it was as if in an instant I had been given this answer that made sense to me, that helped me get out of my despair, that gave me an understanding of what my life was about. So at that point, at the age of 16, in addition to studying all the sciences in Latin, because I was still working toward my goal of going to medical school, but I had a new goal for my life, which was to learn about love. And it's interesting how a 16-year-old might go about trying to figure out what love is, but I remember going to the library and the bookstore and buying books that I could read that I thought were about love. I bought books, nonfiction books that had love in the title. I bought poetry books. I bought some philosophy books and some sociology books to start reading about love. And so what I was trying to educate myself about this subject of love, which I had somehow understood was now my purpose, to learn about love. I didn't know at that young age that love is learned through the heart, not through the mind, though it was probably helpful for me to do all the reading and the research that I did. So I had a lot of understanding about theories about love and what love means and the power of love. But I wasn't actually learning how to love by doing that reading. That would come later in my life through many, many experiences later on. But still, I had this guiding principle for my life, which was love. That's what I'm here for. That's what I came here for. And it occurred to me that it doesn't really matter what kind of job I have or what kind of career I pursue. I can learn about love doing anything. I can learn about love cooking French fries at a fast food restaurant, if that's my job. I can learn about love anywhere, in any sort of job. And that was very reassuring to me because it actually made me feel better when I contemplated, what if I don't get into medical school? What if I'm not successful? What if I can't even accomplish this goal that I wanted to, if I'm a failure at it? It let me know that I could still fulfill my purpose of learning about love no matter what happened. It gave me back that feeling of security and understanding a little bit better the trajectory of my life. Now I could face the unknowns about what will happen. Will I get into medical school? Will I be able to finish medical school and actually become a doctor? I could live with all those questions and those uncertainties because I understood what I really have to focus on is learning about love. So, as I said, that became my guiding force throughout my life. And I'm not sure I totally understood what that was about at that time. I couldn't really articulate to anyone else this understanding that I had for myself. I couldn't really share that with anyone else. It took many, many years for me to begin to see more clearly what that revelation was about. And I would say it wasn't until I started working in hospice with dying patients that information came full circle for me, that I fully understood more about this revelation I had at the age of 16 about love. So I got into hospice, and there's another huge story of how and why I got into hospice, having to do with my dad's suicide death, but that's another story for another time, a longer story. But I came to hospice as a way of dealing with my own grief after my dad's death. Because I didn't know very much about death and dying, I needed to learn about it. And I also needed to learn about grief and how to live with grief. And so hospice was the perfect place for me to learn that. In my hospice work, I got close to many, many patients. I made home visits to all of our patients and got to spend quite a lot of time with them. I often made multiple visits to them and got to sit with them and listen to their stories, hear about their concerns about life, and ask them questions that I was curious about as well. So hospice for me was an incredible curriculum of life through the eyes of dying patients. And this is where what congealed for me was this idea of mortal wisdom, the wisdom that comes from knowing that we're mortal and living right smack in the middle of our mortality, knowing in every moment that we're going to die. And how the world looks at us when we carry that knowledge with us and when we look at life through that lens of mortality. So as I was getting to know hospice patients and working with them, I saw this idea of purpose being a major issue for each one of them. And for example, one of my patients, she was a dietitian who was worked in an academic setting, and she was in the middle of a research project that she had been working on for a few years. And yet she had been given a very short prognosis. She had been told she would only have at most 2 months to live. Now, she told me, I watched her, I sat with her as she mulled over what to do with her 2 months that she had left of life and how to use those 2 months. And she was very concerned about this research project she had devoted so much of her time and energy and knowledge to. And she realized if she worked very, very hard and long hours, she could probably get her research paper finished during that 2 months' time. She could probably accomplish that. But at the same time, she had some relatives back in Germany that she hadn't seen for a number of years, and these were part of her extended family. Her parents had come to the U.S. from Germany, but she had extended family in Germany. She knew that they would not be able to come here to see her, and she had a longing to go there. She hadn't been to Germany for a number of years. She had a longing to go back to Germany, visit the country again, and visit with her loved ones. So I watched her as she struggled with these two questions because she knew she didn't have enough time or energy to do both things. She couldn't make the trip to Germany and finish her research project. So I just got to sit with her while she struggled with these questions. And in the end, she closed her notebooks and she put the research project away. And she and her husband bought a ticket to Germany. And it was actually a difficult trip. She was ill and very tired, and it was challenging to her. But she came back from that trip elated, knowing that she had done exactly the right thing, because the time she had spent there, she was just bathed in love and compassion and caring, and rekindling her connections with people who had been so important to her in her life. And she came back so satisfied and so happy and joyful because she had made the right decision. And as I watched her struggle with that, I thought about my old dilemma in the past. What if I can't fulfill my purpose? What if I don't become a doctor? And I realized she had this purpose. She had been trying to fulfill her research project, but she was able to very gracefully let it go and choose instead love in her life, choose instead to be with the people that mattered to her and to go visit the country where her roots had been. And so that was a tough decision for her to make, but she made it, and I saw how joyful she was at the conclusion of that trip, and that she had no regrets about giving up her research. Once she made the trip, it was very clear to her that was the right decision, and she did not regret at all giving up her research. So taking her story as a template, I was able to observe many other patients in other situations where they face similar decisions. I'm at the end of my life. I have limited time and energy. How do I spend that time? Where do I give my energy, and who do I give my time and energy to in my life? And I got to see people, some who chose to keep working, some who chose the work they were doing because that felt to them at the most compelling thing they could possibly do is finish their work, get something done, get a project done, make sure they left behind something that was a legacy. I saw other people who, like Julie, the woman I mentioned, were able to let go of work and chose relationships instead as the thing that for them was the most important thing to focus on. And I'm not telling you these stories as a way of saying one choice is better than another. My real message is that each one of us will need to make our own choices for ourselves and figure out what is right for us. And so I think that's something very important to keep in mind. We also may come to a crossroads where there are two paths before us, and we cannot do both of the paths. We cannot complete both paths. We have limited time and limited energy, and we ourselves might have to struggle with our choices and which path we decide to align ourselves with. And that's one reason I wanted to do this episode in order to talk about this now, because I believe the more you can come to an understanding of this concept of purpose, the more it might help you as you make decisions now, hopefully a long time before you face that final crossroads at the end of life. But maybe it will help you as you make decisions now and look at your life right now. So I wanted to share with you a quote. This is one of my favorite quotes from Rumi, who wrote, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." So keep that quote in mind. Most of us actually feel some sort of a drive or a desire to change the world in a way. Most of us would like to think that our being here somehow, in some way, made the world a better place, even if it's just around us, our immediate world right around us, the people around us. I think most of us would like to end our lives knowing I made a difference and I changed things. But Rumi's quote is telling us that the only way we can change the world is by changing ourselves. So that's the key to this discussion, this mortal wisdom discussion about purpose, is how do we change ourselves internally in a way that allows us to be a force for positive change in the world. And here's the concept that I finally was able to put together that made sense of that revelation I had when I was 16. And this is what I really wanted to share with you today, is that it became clear to me that for myself, at least, this is the wisdom I've gathered for myself. I'm not saying this will ring true with everyone, but this is how I understand it. That for my life here, I have both an inner purpose and an outer purpose. And this is how I look at it. My inner purpose is what was revealed to me that day when I woke up on the recliner chair. My inner purpose is to learn about love. That's kind of my soul purpose, what I came here for. As a soul, a growing, learning soul connected to the divine, to spirit, is to learn about love. That's my inner purpose. But I also have an outer purpose as a human being alive on this planet. And I can say now that becoming a doctor was part of my outer purpose. Practicing in family medicine was, practicing in hospice was, but also becoming a writer and a podcaster and a speaker was part of my purpose. And I discovered some of those aspects of my purpose later on in life as I kept going down this path of my outer purpose. all the while I was in training to become a doctor, while I was in practice and working in hospice, and the years that I've spent writing and now doing podcasting and speaking, I have kept my focus on my inner purpose, though, my inner purpose of learning about love. And I have seen over and over and over again in my life, I've had opportunities to learn how to love more deeply, more widely, more fully, with much greater capacity. And everything that has come my way in my life, including my dad's death, has come to me offering me the opportunity to learn more about love, to go deeper into love and therefore into grief, because that is what I had to deal with for many, many years after my dad's death. But all of these things that happened to me were in service of my inner purpose of learning about love. Once again, I'm not saying that anyone else's inner purpose is to learn about love, or that that's why all of us are here and that's how it should be for all of us. I just want to share with you what has unfolded for me in my lifetime and how I have come to make sense of it. And so I applied this idea of having an inner and outer purpose to the patients that I was meeting in hospice. And it seemed to ring true every time. I saw patients who had had very worthwhile, fulfilling jobs, who had to give their jobs up at the very end of life, but who still had purpose and meaning in their lives and still went on to do amazing, beautiful things, even as they were dying. Even in the last weeks and months of their lives, they were still learning, they were still growing, they were still transforming. They were learning about different lessons. Some were learning how to handle disappointment, how to handle pain, how to say goodbye, how to forgive. Each person was learning their own individual lessons that I believed they had come here to learn. It was part of their inner purpose that they had come here to accomplish. And I saw them working on their inner world and their inner life in their last days. Most of them were required to give up their outer purpose, whatever their job or career had been, whatever work they had applied themselves to, whether or not it was perhaps motherhood and raising children. They had to surrender the outer purpose, but their learning in the inner world, their inner purpose, continued on until the very last breath. So this concept for me of having both an inner and an outer purpose rang true in my own life, but also in the lives of the hospice patients that I cared for. And I got many, many, many opportunities to witness that and to watch it play out for patients at the end of life. And even so, I have observed it in my friends and family members who are not at the end of life, but I've also seen them discovering that while they have found an outer purpose and made a choice for a career or a job, that there's something beyond that and higher than that or bigger than that that they're learning at the same time. And those people that I know who have awakened to that concept and who have awakened to the idea that they are something more than just the work that they do every day in the world, there's something bigger for them here. They have been able to weather the changes of life, because right now, where we're living in society right now, people change jobs rapidly. Jobs come and go. Even careers can end fairly quickly. There's so much more transience in our world right now than used to be 50 or 100 years ago, when sometimes a person would choose one career path and stay on that path for their entire lives. There's a great deal of change happening all around us now. People might start in one career that within 10 years becomes obsolete. The job that they thought they'd be doing for their lifetime doesn't even exist anymore. Someone might start working for a company that goes out of business or merges or changes their entire mission and focus. And so people living right now in this day and age have had to learn to be very resilient in terms of fulfilling their outer purpose, because it can change frequently. And the more we understand that we have an overarching inner purpose, the more we can tolerate these changes and this impermanence in our work life and in our outer purpose, and survive that, because we also know we're still fulfilling our inner purpose. Now, I had the positive experience and happy experience of discovering my own inner purpose when I was very young, and of knowing that that was my own inner purpose, and being able to utilize that knowledge as a guiding light for me throughout the years of my life. So there are many other stories of ups and downs that happened in all through my medical career that I could tell you, but my knowledge and my understanding that, but I'm really here to learn about love, then every single time there was a downturn or a setback, I could stop and look at that experience and ask, what is here for me to learn about love? Where can I learn how to love better? Who do I need to learn how to love in this situation? And so my inner purpose is what helped me survive and stay afloat through all of the ups and downs and the setbacks and the changes that I had to endure during my outer purpose career as a doctor. So I do talk to a lot of people today, especially younger people, who are wondering, what is my purpose? What am I doing here? And usually when they ask that question and when we begin talking about it, I find out that they are wondering what sort of job they should have. What is the career path that they should take? And I see people putting a lot of time and energy and even worry and anxiety into that question. Why am I here? What career should I choose? And what I would like to encourage people to do is to stop for a moment and think first about, what might my inner purpose be here for my lifetime? Because discovering your inner purpose is actually more important than your outer purpose, if you can believe that or not. I mean, I happen to think for me, it was very important that I became a doctor. That really was part of my path, and really something that has made all the difference in my life. So I'm not taking that career choice lightly. It was very important, but the overarching guiding light of knowing that I'm here to learn about love actually made my career path much easier to follow during my life. So I usually encourage people to ask themselves first, what might my inner purpose be? What am I here for in my inner life and my inner world? What is it that I'm working on in my life as a theme for my life that I came here to learn? And sometimes when we begin to focus on the inner world, it becomes more obvious what our outer purpose should be, and we can find ourselves more inspired and more creative about choosing that outer purpose, and also feeling less driven and less constrained to find the right career, the right job. Because we can begin to let go of that a little bit and recognize that there will be many different jobs we can have and many different careers paths we might follow during our life. And all of those choices and all of those paths will be in service of the inner purpose. So once we understand we have an inner purpose and we begin working toward the inner purpose, then it becomes a little easier and a little bit less forced to make it choices for the outer purpose. And we can let go of it a little bit and also relax that we can't really make a wrong choice. We might make a choice and decide after a few years, I'm no longer happy with this choice. I'm not liking it here and liking what I'm doing. But we don't need to view it as a mistake. We can view it as, wow, well, that was interesting. And that helped me learn a few things in my inner development. But now I'm going to change my outer path again. I'm going to look for something different. I'm going to see what I can move on to and what comes next to me. And what I discovered for myself as kind of an ultimate goal is at some point being able to align inner purpose and outer purpose. And as I mentioned, it occurred to me in the very beginning when I was just 16 that if I ever did get to become a doctor, that would be a great way to learn more about love. And that proved to be true. My career in medicine was an endless curriculum in love, loving when I was exhausted, loving difficult patients, loving angry coworkers, loving people who got me in trouble, loving myself when I failed at things, loving myself when I couldn't finish what I had hoped to do, when I made mistakes. And so medicine was indeed, as my outer purpose, was a fantastic choice to align with my inner purpose of love. And my inner purpose of love what made all the difference in my career in medicine, because the more deeply I learned to love and the more fully I understood love and learned how to transmit love, the more powerful and effective I became as a doctor for my patients, the more easily I could enter my patients' space and hold space with them and recognize their suffering and show them the compassion that they needed. So while working in medicine, as my outer purpose served my inner purpose of learning about love, my inner purpose served my outer purpose as well. And that's what I'm talking about when the two are in alignment. And there can be an amazing feeling of flow that occurs in life. But it may not be easy to bring those two in alignment. So recognize that this is a journey of a lifetime that takes an entire lifetime to learn some of these lessons and to even have it revealed to us what are we truly learning here on the inner world. What is our inner purpose? It might take us years and years before we really become clear about what that is. And during that time, we might go through many different jobs and different careers on our outer purpose path. But all of it is a process of discovery and learning. So I mentioned in the title of this episode how to find your purpose. And in many ways, I want to say, I didn't mean to offer that as if, oh, here, I have the answer for you right here in this moment. You're going to figure it all out and know all of the answers, because I think life is, for the most part, made up of questions, and the answers sometimes are few and far between, and sometimes take many, many years before they become clear. But for each of us, part of our inner purpose is just this idea of awakening to the journey and recognizing that, yes, I have these choices to make for my life. What kind of education should I get? What kind of jobs should I seek? What kind of career should I plan for and prepare myself for? What do I want to accomplish during this lifetime? But knowing above and beyond all of those choices and all of that, there are things we came here to learn. And each of us has our own individual little curriculum waiting there for us to study and to begin to learn. And fear not, you are learning, whether you know what you're learning or not. It may not be clear to you right now what your inner purpose is. You may not recognize that you are learning things in your inner life that you need to know. And you may not even see that they're helping you as you make your career choices in your life. But you will begin to see this with clarity but little bits at a time as you go on with your life. It will become more and more apparent for you and will begin to unfold. So if you set the intention for your life that I want to live my inner purpose and discover what my outer purpose is at the same time and work toward both of those as I live, even if I'm not clear right now or fully have all the answers about what either one of those things are, I'm going to set my intention that I will live my inner purpose in every moment, even as I'm making choices and changes in my outer life and my outer purpose. And I really believe this is what Rumi was talking about when he said he gave up being clever and trying to change the world and became wise instead and began to change himself, because it's this focus on the inner purpose which fuels the outer purpose that allows us to become our best and highest selves. And when we are living our best lives on this planet, when we're living from our highest selves, our highest and best truth of who we are and who we came here to be, we can't help but change the world around us. We cannot help but have an impact on the world and those around us. And here's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that I also love. He wrote, "If you touch one thing with deep awareness, you touch everything." I think that's an absolutely beautiful thought. And it goes along with what I'm discussing. When we become aware and we wake up to the idea that there's some higher purpose here that we're working on, that we're learning in every moment, that continues on regardless of the job we work at, regardless of our career, regardless if our career gets interrupted because we get injured or ill and can't continue to fulfill our outer purpose, we're still living our inner purpose in every moment. And living that purpose means we have the ability to touch one thing, to make a difference in one way to one person, and in so doing that, changing the world, changing everything because of that one touch. So one of my goals for this discussion was to help you think about having both an inner and an outer purpose, but also to take away some of the anxiety about the idea of trying to figure out what those are. And so I hope I didn't introduce more anxiety. By now, not only do you have to figure out what your outer purpose is, you have to figure out what your inner purpose is. Because what I want to emphasize is that you are already living your inner purpose in every moment. And your outer purpose, those are choices you can make for yourself using the best knowledge and wisdom that you have available to you. You're already living your inner purpose and learning things you need to learn, even if you don't know what they are yet. So you can relax a little bit about this, but I do have a few ideas in mind for how you might go about elucidating some of it. The very first step is awareness, which is what I mentioned before. We're all here to wake up and to become aware of the fact that we are something more than just the actions we do every day, than just the jobs we have, the work we do, the motions we go through in a day. We are more than that, and we are here for something bigger than that. That awareness is the very first step. Now, you don't have to know the answer, what it is, what the bigger thing is that you're here for, but knowing that you are here for something bigger than just your job is the very first step and the beginning. And one thing that I could recommend that you might use to start understanding your inner purpose. What I have come to understand is that our inner purpose in many ways comes to us. We actually learn it through our pain. And so you might want to journal a little bit about what has caused you pain in your life, because most often that is where you will see your inner purpose unfolding, and the lessons that you have come here to learn in your inner purpose unfolding through your losses, your failures, your grief, your sense of betrayal, your loneliness, your physical pain and suffering. And so I would encourage you to do a little bit of journaling about the suffering that you've experienced in life, where you feel you have experienced deep pain in your life, and also particularly if there are certain circumstances that seem to come back to you over and over again in life. Are there recurring themes? For example, have you been betrayed multiple times by people that you thought were friends or lovers? Have you not received recognition for something that you did well or accomplished when you believed that it should have been recognized? Have you been in relationships that disempower you over and over again? Or have you been the person to end relationships because you find that you grow dissatisfied with other people and begin to dislike people, even though initially you thought you loved them? Those are just a few themes that you might look at if there have been recurring experiences in your life. Those might be pointing you to some of the lessons that you're working on. And you're being given opportunities over and over again to look at those issues and look at the pain and look at the suffering in your life to see what you can learn from it. So you might journal a little bit about some of the recurring themes of your life, and also where in your life you have met obstacles to your joy and your happiness, because those obstacles might also represent lessons that you haven't learned yet, that you're still working on, things that are part of your inner purpose that you have a lot more education to receive. And so look there at where in your life have you encountered obstacles and times when something has gotten in the way of your happiness or your joy. So this applies in particular to your inner purpose and looking really deep inside at your wounds and your pain and your suffering to see if you can get any kind of clarity on what your inner purpose might be. And as I mentioned, it may not be obvious and you may not know what it is, but that's normal. It may take time. And this is an ongoing research project that takes a whole lifetime to complete. So don't expect that you'll find the answer to this immediately. And I wanted to share a little second thought about finding your outer purpose, because this is something that I think can be really helpful. And I wanted to share with you the concept of Ikigai, Ikigai, which is a Japanese word, and it means a reason to get out of bed in the morning, essentially. So it's really describing, like, what is it in your life that brings you joy and pleasure, that makes you want to get up every day. And so there's a little formula for determining your Ikigai, and I'm going to describe more about what that is and how you find it. And the image of the Ikigai, it's actually 4 overlapping circles that all interconnect in a way so that there is a small shape in the very middle of those 4 circles that contains a piece of each one of the 4 circles. So it's the point of overlap for all 4 of the circles. And so one of the circles contains the answers to this question: what do I love? And so you could even draw these 4 circles if you wanted that had this intersecting point in the very middle. So one circle is, what do I love? The next circle is, what am I good at? So you describe your talents. What do you know is your God-given talent that you were born with in life? In the third circle, you write, what does the world need right now? And so this might take a little research or some thought to think about, what is it that the world seems to need? What is going on around me in the world that there is a need for? And then the fourth circle is, what can I be paid for? Because our passion and our heart work is sometimes not enough to sustain us if it's not something that we can make a living doing. And our outer purpose is to support us and to give us an income so that we can survive in this world. That's one of the four important factors of our outer purpose. Our inner purpose doesn't have that requirement that it has to produce income for us, but our outer purpose does. So it's one of the four circles. So again, what do I love? What am I good at? What does the world need? And what can I be paid for? Those are the four circles. And your ikigai, your reason to get out of bed in the morning, is the point at which all four of those things intersect. So that's an interesting exercise. And I'm going to put on the show notes for this episode, which you can find at eolupodcast.com, an image of the ikigai. And so it shows you how to find that sweet spot in the very middle of those four segments and how they overlap with one another. And so that can be a fun exercise as you start to consider job or career paths that are open to you, maybe available in your community, that pay decently, that you think you would be good at, that you also think you could love. And it helps you look, can you find a path that fulfills all four of those requirements? Then that would be a really good outer path for you to follow. Again, follow that path without being attached to it, knowing it might change. Everything's impermanent. So this job might be here for a while, it might go away, or I might get tired of it and be ready to find the next thing. But filling out these four circles for yourself might be a helpful way for you as you're making choices about your inner life. So particularly if you have two jobs to choose from or two career paths, you might compare them in terms of these four factors to see which one is strongest in the most number of circles, which one fulfills hopefully all four, or at least three of the four for you, except getting paid for it is essential if you're trying to support yourself. So that's one you can't deny, and you can't let go of that one. So those are some of my thoughts and suggestions about getting more clarity about your inner purpose and your outer purpose, or your ikigai. But I wanted to share with you before I close this episode just one last story that's dear to my heart. And this is the story of my mom and how she found her own purpose at the very end of her life. So when my mom was 85, she was stricken with very severe arthritis and became unable to walk without extreme pain. So she made the choice to stop going out of her house. She made the choice to really become homebound. She got a walker so she could get from her bedroom to the bathroom, the kitchen, and the living room. But she really constrained her life down to just that small area in her house, and decided she didn't want to go outside anymore. She was in too much pain to walk that far. But she also decided that at that point that it was probably time for her to die, because she couldn't imagine that her life had a purpose any longer. She wasn't able to go out of the house, and all of her life she had done volunteer work and worked with lots of other organizations and taken meals to people and helped people. And when she was not able to leave the house, she could not imagine that there was any work left that she could do in the world. And so she began to let God know, to tell God that she was ready to go. She was ready to die. Her life was basically over. So she was staying in her house waiting to die and expecting that she just wouldn't wake up one morning and that would be it. And she told me that as well, like, get ready, I'm probably going to die soon, because I decided that I'm ready for that. And so in her mind, that it signaled the end of her life, because she could no longer do the kind of work that she had done to help other people. And she couldn't see a reason why she should still be here on this planet. And she didn't even feel a reason that she wanted to be here on the planet any longer. And that's the state of mind that she was in. So she actually planned her entire funeral and prepared everyone around her, friends and relatives, that she wouldn't be here very long. But it turns out that she didn't die. She kept waking up every morning. Every morning she would wake up and go through her routine and use her walker and get dressed and eat something and go out and sit in her recliner. And she finally decided, like, this is kind of boring. Like, I need to do something because I'm not dying yet. So how can I pass the time until I die? And she decided that maybe she could pray for people, because she used to belong to a prayer group. And that was one thing that she lost when she couldn't leave the house. She couldn't go to her prayer group, but she decided maybe she would start praying for people on her own without having a group of people around her praying together. So she started keeping lists of things that she could pray about when she knew that someone was sick, or someone had lost a job, or someone was expecting a baby. She would keep lists every day of who might need a prayer. And she started spending more and more time sitting in her recliner, praying for people. And this became her daily practice and routine. Every single afternoon, she would get her list out, her little notebook, and start praying for people. And some of her friends found out that she was praying every day and started calling her and letting her know about someone they knew in the community who could use some prayers. So her list kept getting longer and longer. She was spending more and more time in prayer because she had more and more people to pray for. And she began praying for the neighbors who lived next door to her and across the street, who were young families. She was aware of primarily of the women who were moms, trying to be mothers and wives, and also working. And she would see them out the window going off to work and taking their babies to daycare and coming back after work and struggling and exhausted. And she began to pray for them. And one day, one of the neighbors stopped by and just said, I just came to say hello and to chat with you. And so one of these women that she'd been praying for without really even knowing very much about her came for a visit. And my mom got to know her. And soon the other woman from across the street began to come over as well. Mom got to know both of them. And they actually found her to be a great source of wisdom and advice, just about being a mother and being a wife and surviving in this challenging world. And so they would come from time to time and sit with Mom and ask her questions and get support from her, which was really beautiful, that she discovered people in her life who really needed her and what she had to offer. So as time went on, Mom was finding a reason to get out of bed every morning, and a reason to be joyful, and a reason to be happy, because she had actually work that she found. She found an outer purpose that aligned with her inner purpose, really, her inner spiritual purpose of praying for people and really channeling like loving, positive energy to people around her. So Mom lived for 5 years, even though she had decided at the beginning of that 5 years that she was ready to die. She lived for 5 years. And at the end of that time, when her health deteriorated and we knew that it was her time to go and she actually was dying, I came to take care of her for the very last days of her life and stayed in the house with her. So we had a lot of long conversations, and Mom confided in me that she had felt some despair a number of times, that she was still alive and that God had left her and maybe abandoned her here because she felt ready to die and hadn't died. And she did recognize that her life of prayer had benefited a lot of people and had deep meaning to it, but she still was a little bit confused. But like, why didn't God take her when it seemed like it really was time for her to go? But then she had this experience. So Mom was in hospice and she was being cared for by a young nurse who one day confided in my mom that her husband had taken his own life a year earlier, and she was still grieving and suffering over that suicide death. And as you know, or I alluded to, my father also took his life many, many years earlier. So my mom had been a wife who lived through the suicide death of her husband. And she was able to bring so much comfort to her hospice nurse about that, about suicide and about surviving suicide, and that it's possible to go on living. And she brought so much hope and love to her hospice nurse through the interactions that they had. And at that point, Mom said to me, I get it now. I understand it. I understand why God needed me to stay here these 5 more years so that I could meet my hospice nurse and I could help her through this suicide. And she was so satisfied that finally it all made sense to her, including my dad's death that had happened 20 some years earlier. It finally all made sense, and all these pieces of her life, her inner purpose and her outer purpose, her pain, her suffering, her heartache, all came together, and she was able to see all the pieces fall into place and able to see clearly the meaning and the purpose for her entire life, every moment of her life, including the last 5 years when she had questioned why God was leaving her here. So I know that was a bit of a long story, but I did want to share that with you because of the beautiful guidepost it is for us, in a way that it doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter where we are on our path. It doesn't matter whether we even understand our inner or our outer purpose or what we've done in our lives, that everything can and will come together at some point. And if we're lucky, we'll be able to see it with our own eyes and behold the beauty of it. Perhaps, like my friend Jolene, if we die suddenly, we ourselves might not glimpse the perfection of how our lives have come together, but the people left behind after we die will be able to see it, and we'll be able to talk about it and be inspired by it and share it with one another, just as happened after Jolene's funeral. So I hope if you're looking for your purpose, inner or outer purpose, that you found a little bit of inspiration in what I've had to share with you today. And I hope that you'll take some time and do some thinking and some journaling about some of these messages that I brought you. Remember that there's always a new episode every Monday of this podcast, and the Mortal Wisdom series will continue, but I'm kind of alternating a little bit with interviews in between the Mortal Wisdom episodes. So stay tuned for a couple of weeks, and I'll be back with another one of these solo episodes. And then meantime, tune in and listen to the next interview that I'll have for you next week. I invite you, if you enjoy this podcast, to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Also consider signing up at patreon.com/EOLU and spread the word and let other people know that you think might also enjoy listening in. So thanks for being here with me today. And remember that we are here for love. And until next week, face your fear. Be ready for whatever life brings your way, because it is full of surprises and things that you're not really prepared for or expecting. And right now in this moment, love your life just as it is. Bye-bye.